Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? She sat at the far end, back straight, eyes fixed on the map spread across steel. The room hummed with chatter, boots shifting, chairs scraping. Orders were being handed out, names called, assignments marked in red. But when the commander's finger hovered over her sector, it slid past, as if her presence was optional, as if she was air. She didn't flinch, she never did. But inside, the silence pressed heavy, a silence she knew too well. The men beside her whispered, trading grim jokes about the weather, the terrain, the odds. She heard every word. She caught the side glances, the kind that measured, not trusted. She had been here long enough to recognize that silence wasn't always respect. Sometimes it was dismissal. And yet she stayed still. Because there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The mission briefing ended with the slam of a folder. Boots thundered out. One by one they filed past her without a word. The room emptied. Her chair scraped back against the floor. She stood. Her sector was circled in faint ink, a ridge overlooking a valley where intelligence said movement was expected. She memorized every contour, every elevation line. To others, it was just a number on a map. To her, it was everything. Because that ridge carried a story no one in this room knew. The night air hit like ice when she stepped outside. Engines rumbled. Soldiers smoked, cursed, tightened straps. The smell of oil and dust clung to her uniform. Somewhere in the distance, dogs barked. And beyond that, silence. Her rifle was already waiting in its case. She ran a hand across the metal, familiar, cold, heavy with memory. They called her a sniper, but that word, clean, clinical, hid the truth. A sniper doesn't just pull a trigger, she waits. She breathes. She watches lives pass through a scope like ghosts, and sometimes she remembers faces she never even knew. Tonight would be no different. The convoy rolled out before dawn. The desert stretched wide, painted in bruised shades of blue and gray. Tires chewed gravel. Radios crackled. She sat in the back, silent, watching the horizon fold open. No one spoke to her. She didn't need them to. Her mind wasn't here. It was years back. A porch light. A voice she hadn't heard in too long. A promise she made before she left, a promise sealed in silence because words had failed her then. She pressed her lips tight. Focus, not now. The ridge rose like a broken spine against the horizon. They dropped her off at its base. No fanfare. No good luck. Just the grind of gears as the convoy disappeared, leaving behind dust that hung like a curtain in the cold air. She climbed. Boots scraped rock. Fingers brushed against dirt still cool from night. Wind whispered low, carrying sand in fine sprays against her face. By the time she reached the top, the sun was breaking, a thin red line bleeding across the valley. She lay down, adjusted her scope. The world narrowed. Through the glass, the valley stretched alive, trees clinging to water, a narrow dirt road, a cluster of abandoned huts. Shadows moved, not yet clear. She adjusted again, breath steady, trigger finger relaxed. And then silence. Not the silence of being ignored, not the silence of absence. This was different. This silence demanded reverence. The kind where every sound, the tick of her watch, the distant flap of a bird's wing, felt louder than it should. She breathed into it. She let it surround her. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. Heat shimmered off the ground. Her body ached against stone, but she didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked through the scope, waiting. Patience was her weapon. When movement came, it was small. A flicker, shadows near the huts, figures in the distance, shapes carrying rifles. She adjusted, slow, steady, until her crosshairs kissed fabric and skin. Her breath caught. Not because of the target, but because of what she saw beyond them. A child's frame darting between huts, barefoot, thin, carrying a plastic can half his size. Her finger froze. The men moved closer, unaware. The boy vanished into shadow. The crosshairs wavered. Not from her hands, they never shook, but from the weight pressing on her chest. This was the part no one told you about. The part they skipped in the training manuals and the briefings. That the hardest trigger pull wasn't about distance or wind. It was about silence. The silence that came after. Her radio crackled, a voice, command, impatient. "Do you have eyes?" She didn't answer, not yet. Because she was thinking of another child, another memory, another silence she carried. Her cheek pressed tighter to the stock. She whispered to herself, a sound too soft for radios or ears, just a breath, just a name. Her silence wasn't absence. It was presence. A presence filled with all the lives she had seen, all the ones she had lost, all the promises she had kept by not speaking when words would have shattered her. Her finger curled, then stopped. Because something wasn't right. The men weren't just moving, they were waiting. They knew eyes were on them, a decoy, a bait, and the child was being used. She blinked, adjusted, heart heavy. She had a choice. Report too soon and she risked the child's life. Fire too late and her team might walk into a trap. The silence stretched, unbearable, holding the valley hostage. Her radio buzzed again. "Sniper, do you copy?" Her lips parted, then closed. She didn't answer. Instead, she waited, watched, listened to the silence that pressed like a weight against her chest. And then a flicker, a glint of glass in the hills opposite. Another sniper, watching her. Her breath stilled, crosshairs shifted. This wasn't about being ignored anymore. This wasn't about trust or the silence of her comrades. This was about survival, about who would break the silence first. Her finger tightened. The valley seemed to hold its breath. And when the shot rang out, it wasn't just steel on steel. It was years of silence breaking. But not in the way anyone expected. The shot cut through the valley like lightning. And then silence. No echo, no reply, just the weight of sound swallowed by space. Through her scope the glint vanished. A figure toppled. A rifle clattered against stone far away. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. She only watched as dust lifted where the enemy sniper had been. Her own rifle smoked faintly. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air, sharp, metallic. Her heartbeat caught up with her body, heavy thuds pressing against her chest. But she didn't relax. Because silence after a shot is never safety. The valley below seemed to shift. Men scrambled. Shouts carried faint through the air. The boy darted again between huts, stumbling under the weight of his can. She tracked him, heart tight, before sliding her crosshairs back to the fighters. They weren't retreating, they were spreading, setting, preparing. She whispered, so softly it was almost nothing. "A trap." Her radio hissed again, a different voice now, lower, commanding. "Sniper, report." Her lips moved, but no sound came. Not yet. She was calculating, counting, watching the way their rifles pointed not at the huts, not at the valley, but at the road beyond, the road where her team would soon walk. She pressed the radio button at last. Her voice was calm, measured. Ambush, ridge opposite neutralized. Multiple hostiles setting positions near huts. Civilians in play, advise caution. The reply crackled, strained. "Copy, hold your fire unless compromised. We're adjusting route." Hold your fire. That was the order. She knew how to follow orders. She had built her whole life around them, around silence and obedience. But her finger lingered near the trigger, eyes fixed on the boy. He slipped behind a wall, disappeared. Her chest ached. Because it wasn't just him she was seeing. It was her brother. Years ago, before the war, before the uniform. A boy running barefoot across dirt, clutching an old toy plane with both hands. She had watched him once through a window, too proud to join, too angry at a world that already seemed unfair. She hadn't known that was the last time she would see him alive. The memory faded, but it left a scar, one that pulsed now with every beat of her heart. A crack of gunfire snapped her back. Not hers. The valley erupted in short bursts. Dust leapt from the dirt road. She scanned fast. Hostiles firing into empty space, testing, probing, still waiting. Her team wasn't there yet. But soon they would be. She shifted position, crawling across jagged rock, finding a better angle. Each movement deliberate, each breath measured. Sweat slipped down her neck despite the dry air. And all the while silence pressed against her, not the absence of sound, but the presence of choice. Her scope found a fighter closest to the huts, a rifle trained toward the road. She exhaled slow, crosshairs steady. Her finger touched the trigger. But she hesitated, because the boy appeared again, running out too fast, too close. His shadow stretched across the man's boots. If she fired now, her throat tightened. The boy stumbled, dropped the can. Water spilled into dust, swallowed instantly. The man barked something, shoving the child back toward the huts. The boy ran, vanished. She exhaled hard, jaw tight. Her finger eased. Her silence held, but only for a moment. Through the scope she caught something else, a flash of fabric deeper in the huts. Not fighters, women. Older faces drawn, eyes wide with fear. Civilians huddled in the corner of a ruined room. At least 4, maybe more. Her chest hollowed. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a stage, and the enemy had chosen their audience carefully. Her radio buzzed again. Sniper confirmed status. She swallowed. Ambush confirmed. Civilians on site. Possible human shields. Static hissed. Then the reply came, cold, clipped. Order stand. Hold position. Do not engage. She closed her eyes for a beat. Order stand. The words echoed. Familiar. Always familiar. How many times had she heard them? How many times had she obeyed, even when silence screamed louder than the orders themselves? Her hand trembled, just once, just enough that she tightened her grip to hide it. Because there was something else, something she hadn't told them, not yet. Her mission wasn't just theirs, it was hers. She had volunteered for this sector, not for glory, not for trust, for something deeper, something she couldn't speak aloud because words would have broken it. This valley, this very ridge, was where her brother's unit had vanished years ago, a mission written off as lost. No remains brought home, no closure given, just silence. But she had never believed silence was empty. So when she saw this assignment appear in the roster, she had taken it without hesitation. She didn't tell them why. She didn't tell them that the silence here wasn't absence. It was presence, his presence, and she would not leave until she knew. The fighters moved again. She tracked them, every muscle wired tight. Her radio crackled with distant chatter. Her team was approaching from the west, too soon, too exposed. Her finger brushed the trigger. And then movement in her scope. Not fighters, not civilians, something on the far ridge where she had dropped the enemy sniper. A shape rising, staggering. Her breath hitched. He wasn't dead. The man she had shot was moving, crawling, dragging himself behind cover. A trail of blood marked the stone, dark against pale rock. He reached for something. A pack, a radio. Her pulse surged. She adjusted aim, steady, slow, crosshairs aligned with his head. But she hesitated again. Because his face, pale, contorted, twisted with more than pain, with fear, with desperation. And she wondered, not for the first time, what it meant to end a life already half gone. What silence followed that? Her radio snapped sharp. Sniper, we need confirmation. Do you have them in sight? She didn't answer. Instead, she watched, listened, waited. The man's lips moved, whispering into his radio. His words carried faint across the wind. She didn't understand the language, but she understood the tone. A warning, a call. For someone else. Her chest tightened. This wasn't over. The ambush wasn't all of it. There was something bigger, something coming. She exhaled slow, whispered to herself barely a sound. Not yet. Her finger eased off the trigger. Because sometimes silence isn't absence, it's defiance. She slid back from her position, crawling low across rock, repositioning to watch the road. Her team would appear soon, too soon. She had to choose, break orders or break the silence. Her cheek pressed to stone, she steadied her breath. The valley shimmered in the heat. The boy reappeared near the huts, clutching something now, not water, not food, something wrapped in cloth. Her gut clenched. She zoomed in. It wasn't a toy. It was wired. Her blood froze. The boy's small hands shook as fighters gestured, forcing him forward toward the road. Her heart stopped. This was it. The trap wasn't rifles. It wasn't crossfire. It was him, a child carrying what he didn't understand. Her finger tightened again. And she knew silence would not hold forever. How do you stop a child who doesn't know he's carrying death? Her hands didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't waver. But inside, the silence roared. The kind of silence that pressed into your chest and made you feel like you were drowning. Through her scope, she saw the boy stumble forward. His bare feet scraped dust. The cloth-wrapped weight clutched tight to his chest. Fighters shouted behind him, rifles raised, forcing him on. He shook his head, sobbed something inaudible, but still walked. Toward the road. Toward her team. Her finger tightened against the trigger, breath shallow. One shot, that's all it would take. A single crack of sound and the silence would collapse into something else, something she couldn't undo. Her radio buzzed, urgent. Sniper status, report now. She didn't answer, couldn't. Words felt impossible, because what would she say? That a boy was about to carry death straight into their path, that the choice was hers alone. Orders said hold fire, orders said wait. But orders didn't see his face, orders didn't hear his crying. She exhaled slow, the kind of breath that carried years of weight, and in that moment she remembered something. Her brother's voice. It came back like a ghost, a memory carved deep from the last night she saw him alive. He was younger, full of fire, restless in a world that offered him nothing. He had stood in the doorway of their kitchen, a hand on the old rifle their father left behind. His voice had cracked with determination. Someone has to do something. We can't just sit silent. And she had said nothing, had let silence answer for her. The next week he was gone. Her breath caught. The boy stumbled closer, 20 meters, 15. The cloth shifted, revealing wires crude but lethal. Her team would see him too late. Her cheek pressed harder to the stock, crosshairs locked to his chest. She whispered not to him, not to anyone, just to the silence. I'm sorry. Her finger began to squeeze. But then a movement. The boy tripped, fell to his knees. The bundle rolled from his hands, sliding across the dirt. His cry tore through the valley, raw, sharp. Fighters behind him cursed, waving rifles, forcing him up. She shifted aim, crosshairs snapped to the bundle. The cloth had loosened. She saw what lay beneath. Not just wires, not just explosives, a trigger-rigged crude set to pressure. Her pulse surged. If the boy picked it up again. Her radio cut sharp. Sniper, talk to me, what's happening? She shut her eyes for half a second, opened them, scope steady. The boy's hand reached for the bundle. Her finger moved first. The shot cracked, echoing sharp. The bundle burst apart in dust and flame, a controlled detonation tearing it open. The boy flinched back, thrown to the ground. Fighters scattered, shouting, ducking from the blast. Through her scope she saw him alive, shaken, crying, but alive. Her chest burned, relief mixed with guilt, heavy as stone. Her radio filled with voices now, rapid, confused. Sniper, what the hell was that? She pressed the button, voice low, steady despite the storm inside. Device neutralized, civilian unharmed, Multiple hostiles still in play, advise caution. Static, then silence. For a moment, only her breath filled her ears. And then gunfire. The fighters opened fire down the road, rifles flashing, bullets cutting dust. She tracked quickly, snapping her scope across targets. One by one, she marked them, choosing carefully, firing only when the angle cleared of civilians. Her shots cracked steady, precise. Each one echoed across stone, carried on the air. With each pull, silence broke, then rebuilt itself, heavier, thicker. Bodies fell. The boys scrambled back into the huts, disappearing again. And still more fighters poured from shadows. The valley came alive with chaos. Her radio shouted now, voices overlapping. Her team had heard. They were closing in. But she wasn't listening, not fully, because beneath the roar of battle, another silence whispered. This wasn't just about tonight, not just this mission. The fighters weren't random. The location wasn't random. The use of a child, it wasn't desperation. It was a message. And she feared she already knew who that message was for. Her brother's face flickered again in her mind. The way he had disappeared into silence. The way no one ever found him. What if this wasn't coincidence? What if this valley, this ridge, this ambush, all of it was tied to him? Her chest tightened. Because she had never stopped searching. Even after the reports declared him gone. Even after the silence of official words told her to let go. She never believed in absence. She believed in presence. Her rifle cracked again, another target down. Fighters scrambled, retreating toward the huts. She adjusted, exhaled, waited. Then movement on the far ridge. Not the wounded sniper, someone else. A figure tall, broad, standing in shadow, watching. Not firing, not hiding, just watching. Her breath stilled. She shifted her scope. The figure's face was hidden beneath a scarf, but his stance, something about it sent a shiver through her. Not enemy, not ally, something else. He raised a hand, a signal, a warning. And then he was gone, slipping behind stone. Her chest hammered. She pulled back from the scope, blinking hard, grounding herself. Dust swirled. Smoke rose from where the device had detonated. Civilians cried faint inside the huts. Her radio still shouted for updates. But she wasn't listening. Because her silence was full of questions, full of ghosts. She whispered again, softer this time. "Is it you?" The words were lost to the wind. Gunfire still cracked below, but it sounded distant now. Her focus tunneled on that ridge, that shadow, that gesture. Her orders were clear. Hold position, cover the team. But her heart said something else. She had come here not just for this mission, but for truth, for answers buried in silence too long. And she felt in her bones that tonight was not coincidence. The valley held secrets, and she would not leave until silence gave them up. Her radio crackled once more, sharp. "Sniper status report. Do you still have eyes?" She pressed the button, voice steady but low. Eyes on, holding. But inside she knew she was lying. Because her eyes were no longer just on the valley. They were searching the silence, searching for him. The boy's cry still echoed faint in her mind. The memory of her brother's last words pressed heavy on her chest. And the figure in the distance, the one who had watched but not fired, lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. She slid another round into her chamber. And whispered to no one but the silence. "This isn't over." The valley stretched wide before her. The battle still raged, but something deeper stirred beneath it all. And she knew the hardest part hadn't even begun. What do you do when the silence holds more answers than the noise? She lay flat against the ridge, cheek pressed into stone, scope sweeping the valley below. Smoke curled from shattered huts. Fighters scattered in retreat, their gunfire thinning as her team pressed forward. The boy was gone again, hidden among women whose cries cut through the air like thin glass. The battle was ending, But her silence was only beginning. Her finger hovered near the trigger, but she didn't fire. Not now. Not while her mind replayed what she'd seen. That figure, the one who hadn't fired, the one who had stood tall in shadow, a presence that unsettled her more than the enemy sniper ever could. He had watched her, not the valley, not the civilians, her. Why? Her chest tightened as she replayed the moment, the hand raised, deliberate, almost like recognition. Not threat, not surrender, something in between. She blinked hard, pushed the thought down, but it clung stubborn. Her radio snapped. Sniper advance team at Valley Edge. Area's hot. Need overwatch. She pressed the button, voice flat, steady. Copy, eyes on. Her orders were clear. Cover them, keep them alive, nothing else. But her silence whispered of something more. The team moved into view, shadows against dust. She tracked them through her scope, covering angles ready for stragglers. Her rifle cracked once, dropping a fighter hidden in rubble. Another fell moments later. Precision, patience. The squad advanced, sweeping huts, securing ground. And yet her gaze kept pulling back, to the far ridge, to where the figure had been. Empty now. She exhaled slow, chest heavy. For years she had lived in silence others didn't understand. They thought it meant distance, coldness. But silence was how she carried him, her brother, how she held on to a promise she never spoke aloud. He had been 17, too young, too stubborn. She remembered the night he left, the slam of the door, the porch light still burning long after he vanished down the road. She had wanted to call out, to stop him, to tell him he didn't need to prove himself. But she hadn't. Silence had stopped her, and silence had kept him gone. Her rifle clicked, empty. She reloaded, the sound crisp against stone. The battle below dulled. Shouts replaced gunfire. Her team moved into position, securing civilians, checking bodies. The valley stilled. But her silence grew heavier. Because she couldn't shake it. The figure, the ridge. The way her chest had clenched as if memory itself had taken shape before her eyes. She shut her scope, leaned back against stone, closed her eyes. And for a heartbeat, she let herself imagine. What if it was him? What if her brother wasn't gone? What if the silence that followed his disappearance hadn't been death, but presence? She shook her head, too dangerous. Hope was a trap sharper than any bullet. Her radio buzzed again. All clear, civilians secure. Sniper, hold until further orders. She exhaled slow. Copy. Hold, always hold. The sun sank lower, shadows stretching across the valley like scars. The wind picked up, whispering against stone. Her body ached from stillness, but she didn't move. She stayed in her silence, eyes searching the ridges even as orders told her to wait. Because orders didn't matter as much as silence did. Not now. When darkness fell, the valley shifted. Fires crackled in huts. Soldiers' flashlights cut thin beams through smoke. Her team's voices drifted faintly up the ridge, but she stayed apart, alone. That's how it always was. A sound behind her. She froze, slowly turned. Nothing, just wind slipping over rock. But the feeling remained, she wasn't alone. Her scope swung to the far ridge, empty, silent. And yet her chest hammered. She whispered, barely audible. Is it you? The words were swallowed by night. Her mind told her it was impossible. Her brother was gone, lost in silence long ago. But her gut told her something else. She shifted position, scanning again. Every shadow a threat, every flicker a possibility. The radio crackled. Sniper, rotate down. Team will hold valley. You're relieved. Relieved. The word struck harder than it should. Because how do you relieve silence? How do you step away from the one place it feels like your presence still matters? She didn't answer right away. Her finger hovered over the button. Finally. Copy. She pulled back slow, deliberate, packed her rifle, slung it tight. The climb down was harder in darkness. Every rock shifted, every breath carried too loud. By the time she reached the valley floor, her body ached with fatigue. The team glanced at her when she arrived, just glances, no words. She was used to that. Silence followed her even among them. One soldier nodded, a small acknowledgement. Another offered her a bottle of water. She shook her head, slipped past. Her eyes found the boy. He sat with the women, knees pulled tight to his chest, face streaked with dirt and tears. He looked smaller now, fragile, alive because of her silence and because of her shot. But he didn't look at her. He didn't need to. She already knew what his silence carried: fear, confusion, grief. And maybe a chance. Her chest ached as she turned away. The commander approached, jaw set, clipboard in hand. His voice was clipped, formal. "Good work, clean shots. Device neutralized, minimal civilian casualties." She nodded, but inside his words meant nothing. Clean shots, minimal casualties, that wasn't what she carried. She carried the boy's tears, the women's cries, the shadow on the ridge. And her silence. Always her silence. The commander eyed her, waiting for a response. She gave none. He sighed, muttered something under his breath, and walked on. She watched him go, watched the team settle, smoke, laugh softly in exhaustion, watched the valley fade into night. And then, when no one was looking, she stepped away. Toward the far ridge. Every step was deliberate, slow. Her boots pressed against dirt, crunching faint in the silence. The moon hung low, pale against a sky thick with stars. She shouldn't go, she knew that. Orders were clear: stay with the team, hold position. But her silence demanded more. Because if that figure was real, if it was him. Her breath caught at the thought. She climbed, each muscle screaming, each breath heavier. Rocks scraped her palms, dust clung to her throat, but she didn't stop. Halfway up she paused, looked back. The valley stretched below, dotted with lights, soldiers moving like ants. Beyond that, endless dark. She turned forward again, kept climbing. At the top the ridge spread wide, empty. She stood still, scanning, listening. Silence. But not absence, presence. She felt it, the way the air shifted, the way her chest tightened. And then a sound, soft, deliberate. Boots against stone. She spun, rifle raised. A shadow stood 10 paces away, tall, broad, still. Her heart hammered. The figure stepped forward, moonlight brushing his face just enough to show eyes. Dark, piercing, familiar in a way that hurt. Her breath stopped. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Because silence was all she had left. And in that silence, she asked the only question that mattered. Was it him? She waited. That's what struck them most, not her aim, not her medals, not her scars, but the way she could wait in silence longer than anyone else. The storm had passed overhead hours ago, leaving behind a raw sky, broken clouds scattering light across the ruined village. The rubble smoked. Somewhere beneath it, a radio still crackled faintly, lost between static and fragments of voices. She was crouched at the top of a collapsed wall, her rifle across her knees, her eyes fixed on something no one else seemed to see. The squad shifted nervously. They had secured the perimeter, swept for movement, even cleared the basements. But she hadn't moved. One of them asked, finally, "What are you looking for?" She didn't answer, she didn't even turn her head. The silence hung heavy, the kind that made grown men doubt themselves. Because she saw it, the wrongness. The way one sheet of tin shook against the wind. The way a door was closed too carefully when the building was half destroyed. The way fear hides itself badly. She whispered at last, "They're still here." And in that single sentence, everything changed. The squad tensed. Fingers tightened on triggers. Someone cursed under their breath. How did she know? Where was the proof? But no one dared question her outright. They had seen her be wrong only once, and it had cost them blood. She adjusted her rifle, eyes narrowing. Every sound grew sharper, the buzzing of flies, the drip of rain off broken stone, the faint metallic click from deep inside a house that should have been empty. A trap. She should have called it in. Protocol demanded she did, but instead she let the silence stretch, because calling it in would bring orders, and orders didn't always care about survival. Orders would say, advance. Orders would say, clear it. And men would walk into the teeth of something waiting for them. So she stayed quiet. That was her rebellion, not loud, not dramatic, just silence, the refusal to obey in the way they expected. One of the younger soldiers, maybe 19, shifted beside her. His breathing was too fast, his grip trembling. She reached out, not with words, but a steady hand against his arm. A reminder, calm. He swallowed, steadied himself. He would remember that touch for the rest of his life more than any speech. The squad leader finally broke, his voice sharp, tired. "We don't have all day." Her reply was softer than the wind. "Then you don't understand what waiting costs them." She didn't explain who them was, the enemy in the ruins, the civilians trapped beneath, or maybe herself. The next moment came fast. A figure slipped from shadow to shadow, small, fast, too low to be a soldier. She saw the outline of a child, but the way the child moved, precise, rehearsed, told another story. She felt her chest tighten. She knew. Her finger hovered on the trigger. The silence grew unbearable. The squad watched her, waiting for her choice. Her memories came uninvited. A girl back home, her little sister running barefoot across the grass, hair tangled, face lit with laughter. She had left that girl behind years ago, trading innocence for war. Was she really about to destroy another child to keep her men alive? The figure dropped something. Metal glinted, a charge. Her decision came in less than a heartbeat. One shot, sharp and merciless. The figure fell, the charge rolling harmlessly into rubble. No one cheered, no one spoke. Because they all saw the same thing she did. When the body rolled into the light, it was young, too young. The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. One soldier muttered, broken, "God." Another turned away, swallowing hard. The youngest of them all clenched his jaw until it hurt. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't explain herself, because no words could. Later, when the commander demanded a report, they would leave this moment out. They would say, hostile neutralized. They would say, device secured. They would reduce tragedy into clean lines on paper. But here in the ruins, the silence stayed. And it wasn't absence, it wasn't emptiness. It was presence, the kind of presence that demanded reverence. Her squad felt it, the weight of her choices, the cost she carried, the patience that saved them, the silence that judged them all. She looked down at her rifle, hands steady, though her heart felt anything but. Then she rose, scanning the horizon. There was still more waiting to do, more traps, more choices. But none of them doubted her now, not after this. Because sometimes silence was not weakness. Sometimes silence was war. She didn't sleep that night. None of them really did, but she least of all. The village had gone quiet after the shot. Too quiet, like the earth itself held its breath. They set a perimeter rotated watch, boiled what water they could find in dented canteens. Some tried to laugh, make jokes that fell flat in the dust. Others sat staring at nothing. The boy soldier she had steadied earlier kept running his hands over his helmet, like if he stopped, the silence would crush him. She sat apart, rifle across her lap, back pressed against broken stone, eyes always scanning. But the truth was, she wasn't looking outward, not really. She was listening inward, to the echo of that single shot. It replayed in her head, the recoil, the crack through air, the way the child's body folded. She didn't regret the choice, not exactly. It had saved her squad, but the price of it wasn't just blood. It was memory, memory that would not release her. And she knew this wasn't the last. The squad leader approached. He was older, grayer at the edges. He lowered himself to the dirt beside her. He didn't speak at first. He just let the silence sit between them. She respected that. Words rushed too easy for most. They wanted to patch wounds with sentences that never held. Finally, he said, "We'll move at first light, high ground to the west." She nodded once. Then softer, "You did what you had to." She didn't answer, didn't even look at him. Because she'd heard those words before, from a different mouth. Years ago when she came home from her first deployment, eyes hollow, hands trembling, her mother had said the same thing. You did what you had to. But it hadn't made her sleep any easier. It hadn't stopped the dreams. He waited, maybe hoping she'd respond. She didn't. Eventually, he stood and walked away. Her silence was an answer in itself. At dawn, they moved. The mist clung low, muffling boots on gravel. She led as always. Not because anyone said she should, but because they trusted the way her eyes caught what theirs missed. She raised a hand, signaled halts, sent them forward in bursts. The language of soldiers without words. Halfway up the ridge, they found a trail, fresh prints, heavier than civilians, staggered like weight carried. Men hauling gear. Enemy moving ahead of them. She crouched low, brushing her fingers over the impression in the dirt, still warm, which meant close. Her chest tightened again, that same knot as the night before. Not fear, not exactly, more like the slow grind of inevitability. She signed ambush. They set positions, covered angles, waited. The boy beside her whispered, too loud, "What if they don't come?" She turned her head just enough that he saw her eyes. The look said everything. They always came. Minutes stretched, breath held. Her cheek pressed against the stock, scope steady, watching the bend in the trail. And then movement. Figures, 3, then 5, then more, weapons slung, tired, unaware. Her heartbeat slowed. This was her world. Time stretched thin, stretched silent. She could have taken the first shot, dropped the lead, started the storm, but she waited. Because she saw something, always something others missed. The second man carried a pack, too heavy, straps cutting into his shoulders. He adjusted it nervously more than once. Not like gear, not like supplies, like something that could burn the world if dropped wrong. Explosives. She let the squad leader know with a gesture. His jaw tightened. Options collapsed. They couldn't fire one stray round, one pack ruptured, and the ridge would be their grave. So again, silence became their weapon. She tracked, not shooting, waiting for the one moment that would matter, the moment when taking a life saved lives. The squad fidgeted. The young one wiped sweat. The older ones trusted her stillness. And then one of the enemy paused, looked up, straight at their ridge. His eyes widened, his mouth opened. Her shot was already there, clean, final. The others dove, shouts cracking the valley. Chaos, but her silence had already dictated the rhythm. The squad moved under her cover, bullets finding stone, dirt, anything but those packs. She called shots with gestures, with where her barrel leaned, never shouting, never breaking her quiet. When it ended, the survivors fled, packs still intact, carried into shadows they couldn't chase. Not today. The squad regrouped, breaths ragged. The boy exhaled hard, shaking his head. How do you just know? She didn't answer. She only started moving again. But inside, she asked herself the same question. How did she know? How had silence become her compass? It wasn't training. Not really. Training taught you rules, protocols, predictable things. But silence taught you people. Silence taught you when a laugh cracked wrong, when footsteps carried weight, when a child wasn't just a child. Silence had raised her in a way. She, grown up in a house where words were weapons, where her father's voice filled the rooms with thunder, and her mother's silence was the only shield. She learned early that quiet could hold more truth than shouting ever did. And here she was, all these years later, carrying that same lesson into war. By the time they reached the crest, the sun burned off the mist. The squad collapsed behind cover, drained. She stood a little apart, eyes scanning the valley below. Smoke trailed from distant rooftops. Birds circled above, restless. The leader came to stand beside her. He said nothing, just followed her gaze. After a long moment, he murmured, "You see the war differently than the rest of us." She didn't turn, didn't smile, just let the silence speak for her. Because he was right. And the silence that wrapped around her now wasn't absence. It was presence. The kind that demanded reverence. Why did she walk into the ruins alone? That's what the boy kept asking in his head, even as the squad settled down to rest in the abandoned farmhouse. Why did she always choose silence, distance, separation, as though the weight she carried couldn't be shared? The truth was, she didn't know how to share it. She moved through the shattered doorframe like a shadow. The air inside was heavy with dust, broken beams leaning like bones. She kept her rifle low but her senses high. Every creak in the wood, every whisper of air through cracks in the roof, it all spoke to her in ways words never could. And as she walked, she remembered. Her sister's voice, faint now after so many years but still the one thread that tied her to something softer than war. The last letter had arrived months ago, folded carefully, ink smudged by tears or rain, she could never tell. "Come home when you can. We wait for you. Even when you don't write back, I know you're still out there." That letter lived in her pocket, tucked close to her chest. She had read it more times than she could count. And yet, she'd never written back. Silence was easier. Words might open wounds she couldn't afford to carry here. A piece of glass snapped under her boot. She froze, listened. From behind a wall, faint, too faint for anyone else, but not for her, a cough. Small, weak. Not enemy, not soldier, civilian. Her grip tightened. She motioned silently for two men outside to join her. They slipped in, rifles raised. Behind the wall, they found them. A woman, gray-faced and trembling, her arms wrapped around a boy no older than 10. His eyes wide, skin bruised with dust. They'd hidden through the night, through the firefight, through her shot, waiting for either rescue or death. The soldiers relaxed, one lowering his weapon entirely. "We'll get them out," he whispered. But she didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on the boy's hands, the way they clutched his mother, the way his knuckles were white with more than fear. Her heart beat slow, deliberate. She'd seen hands like that before, holding something, hiding something. The boy met her gaze, and in his eyes she saw the same thing she'd seen in the ruins yesterday. Innocence twisted into a weapon. The silence in that room grew unbearable. The other soldiers didn't see it. They wanted to move, to lift the mother, to carry them out. She stepped forward, slowly, kneeling. Her rifle lowered, her voice finally breaking the quiet. "Show me your hands." The mother gasped, shook her head, spoke too fast in a language the squad only half understood, pleading, begging. But the boy hesitated, and in that hesitation she had her answer. Her hand shot forward quicker than his reaction. She grabbed his wrist, twisting. Something small and metallic clattered to the floor. A pin, a fragment, a grenade without its body. The room froze. The soldiers went pale, realizing what they'd almost carried into their safe house. The mother broke then, sobbing into her boy's hair, whispering words no one could translate. The soldiers shifted, anger in their eyes, betrayal in their throats, but she stopped them with just one glance. No words, just silence. Because she understood. That boy hadn't chosen this. Someone else had. Someone had placed that weight in his hands, the same way war had placed a rifle in hers. And if silence had taught her anything, it was that judgment came too easy when you spoke too soon. She pocketed the pin, stood, motioned for the squad to escort them out carefully, gently, not as enemies, as survivors. Later outside, the boy soldier asked her, voice shaking, why didn't you end it there? He could have killed us." She looked at him, held his gaze until he flinched. Then she said, quietly, Because sometimes silence means letting someone live with the weight instead of ending it for them. He didn't understand, not yet, but he would. That night, around a fire built too small to give real comfort, one of the older soldiers shared his story. About a daughter he hadn't seen in 3 years. About how she stopped answering his calls after the second deployment. His voice cracked once, just once, before he steadied it with a drink. No one replied, they just listened. And in that silence, his story became part of theirs. She sat with them, eyes on the flames, letter still tucked near her heart. She thought of her sister, of the words unwritten, of how silence had protected her family from truths too heavy to carry. But maybe silence wasn't always protection. Maybe it was absence too. The fire cracked, sparks spiraled up into the black. She didn't say it out loud, but the thought burned in her chest. If I survive this, I'll write back. I'll break the silence. And for the first time in a long time, that promise felt like hope. The dawn came without color, just gray. A sky that seemed undecided, holding back light like it wasn't sure the world deserved it yet. They moved in silence. No jokes now, no muttered complaints. The squad followed her lead as though her footsteps carved the only safe path through the earth, and in some ways they did. The mission had led them here, the last ridge, the last village, the last stronghold before they could call it finished. But war never ended cleanly. It lingered in corners, in ruins, in the hearts of children who had been taught to carry weapons instead of toys. She knew this ridge would break them, one way or another. The valley stretched wide before them, abandoned houses, smoke rising thin and steady from one cluster of roofs, a sign of life or bait, always bait. Her squad leader crouched beside her. This is it. His voice was tight, heavy. She nodded once, then pressed her cheek against her rifle, scanning. Through the scope she saw shadows moving in the windows, shapes too deliberate to be ghosts, armed, waiting. And something else, a flicker of light from the rooftop, a reflection, a sniper's glass aimed right back at her. Her breath slowed. She counted the beats of her own heart. She thought of her sister's letter against her chest, of the boy from last night, his small hand shaking with the weight of something too cruel for his age. She thought of every silence she had carried into these ruins. She didn't look away, didn't flinch. She simply adjusted her scope until she was staring into the eye of the one who hunted her. A man, weathered face, calm. He didn't fire, not yet. He was waiting too. For a moment it was just the two of them, two ghosts in the valley, two mirrors of silence locked across distance. The world seemed to hold its breath. Her finger rested on the trigger. The squad waited for her to signal, but she didn't. Because in that instant she understood. Silence wasn't just her weapon. It was theirs too. And sometimes silence was the only truce this world could ever offer. The man blinked, lowered his rifle. She exhaled, lowered hers too. The squad tensed, confused, ready to argue. But one look from her stopped them cold. Because they felt it, that strange reverence that came when silence spoke louder than violence. The man disappeared into the shadows. The village stayed still. The trap was never sprung. And she knew. He had seen her, he had understood, he had chosen the same as her. They pulled back, step by step, no words, no explanations. When the ridge was behind them, the boy soldier finally whispered, almost desperate, "Why didn't you take the shot? You had him, you had him." She paused, looked at him, and though she wanted to give him the clean answer, the kind that fit into orders and reports, she didn't. She said only, because sometimes silence is the victory. He didn't understand, not yet, but he would. One day, when the echoes of his own shots haunted him, when he learned that not every enemy is meant to fall, some are meant to walk away. That night, as the squad reached safe ground, she sat apart again. She unfolded the letter. Read the lines her sister had written, ink smudged by rain or tears. And for the first time in years, she pulled out her pen. Her hand trembled, not from fear, from release, from the breaking of a silence that had lasted too long. She wrote slowly, words scraping against paper like wounds against skin. She didn't write about battles or shots or children with grenades in their hands. She wrote about waiting, about listening, about the strange kind of reverence that silence demanded. And she ended with this: "I'll come home, not the same, but I'll come. And if words fail me when I arrive, know this: my silence isn't absence, it's presence. It's everything I couldn't say standing beside you." She folded the paper, pressed it to her lips, closed her eyes. The fire beside her crackled low, men whispered, the night carried on. But in her silence there was no emptiness anymore, only presence. The kind that demanded reverence. The kind that would stay with them all. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts, and leaves behind a silence that lingers long after the last shot has faded.